This is going to be an extremely busy month. I have to watch 104 soccer games, follow the pregame, the postgame, yell useless opinions at the TV. It's a lot. So I knew that when it comes to screening for colon cancer, the choice was clear. The Cologuard Plus test. It can be used at home and can only take 15 minutes, so I can do it during halftime and not miss any action. If you are 45 or older and at average risk, ask your healthcare provider about screening for colon cancer with the Cologuard test. You can also request a prescription at Cologuard.com.
This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
Welcome back, True Crime Army. I am your host, Margot, and this is Military Murder, a show where I discuss true crime cases involving military members and veterans. And I do this to remind us all to remain vigilant always, regardless of who you are around. Today, I am bringing you a wild crime from the 80s. It is truly a tragedy committed at the hands of a man that seems to have lost touch with reality. At the end of this episode, you will be left scratching your head wondering, why in the world did this man do that? With that, join me today as I bring you the tragic story of the Helwig family attack. Now, let's dig in.
Military murder is an independent project and is not endorsed by the Department of Defense or any military component. The views expressed are those of the host. The content of this podcast is not meant to be legal or medical advice. Warning, this episode contains graphic details of murder and is not suitable for young listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
Just before 4 a.m. on Wednesday, May 11th, 1983, a prowler crept through the dark streets of Livonia, Michigan. The man wasn't looking for a random house to break into, though. The lurker was hyper-focused on a 2-story house on a cul-de-sac located on Granada Street. Livonia is a suburb about 20 miles west of Detroit, and despite the quiet neighborhood, the early 80s wasn't a necessarily idyllic time to live in the Detroit area. Crime was at a high, and people tended to keep their doors locked even in the burbs. It didn't matter to the prowler, though. He didn't need a key. He knew exactly how to get into the house and where to go once he got inside. The house had 4 bedrooms, all located on the second floor of the home. The prowler also knew that by 4 a.m., everyone inside the house would be fast asleep. Once he crept up the stairs, he slipped into the primary bedroom where the homeowners were sleeping. At around the same time that the man crept into the bedroom, 41-year-old Dennis Helwig Sr. woke up to someone kneeling over him. He felt like he was having a really bad nightmare, but then he realized he was being stabbed in real life. As Dennis's brain tried to make sense of what was happening, he could feel that he had been stabbed in his chest. The person attacking him was just inches from his face, and that's when Dennis thought he recognized the man for a quick second. But then he thought, no, it can't be. In that instant, the intruder slashed Dennis in the throat, cutting into his windpipe, and that's when Dennis passed out. Taking the knife, the man set his sights on Dennis's wife, 39-year-old Carol Helwig. When Dennis came to, he saw Carol being stabbed repeatedly in the chest, abdomen, neck, and head. Carol was in the same state of disbelief as Dennis when her attack started. She was in that period in between being asleep and awake and briefly thought she was being punched as the figure loomed over her. The hits weren't punches, though. They were stabs from the knife. The attacker decided he had finished slashing and stabbing Carol, and that's when he left the room. And then, in what can only be described as a Herculean effort, Carol got up and chased the man into the hallway. No kidding, this woman had been stabbed, yet she had enough energy to chase the man down the hallway. I'm sure her instincts were to protect her children. You see, the Helwigs had 3 children who were living in the home. 16-year-old Terry and their daughters, 13-year-old Cheryl and 9-year-old Jill, who were just down the hallway. Simultaneously, as Carol moved toward the hallway, Dennis came to and grabbed the phone in the bedroom to call the police. In the hallway, the assailant turned and fired a gun once at Carol, hitting her in the lower part of her chest. She could hear Dennis on the phone with 911 telling them that they had been attacked. Dennis was telling the dispatcher that he had seen the attacker and knew who it was. As Dennis was on the phone with 911, the gunman tried to gain access to the primary bedroom, but Dennis got to the door and tried to slam it closed. But Dennis was too slow, and the gunman reached the hand inside the door and fired, hitting Dennis once in the forearm. This caused Dennis to fall back, but the gunman didn't continue his pursuit. Instead, he went into 16-year-old Terry's bedroom and stabbed the teenager in the chest. But the attack on Terry didn't stop there. The intruder then shot Terry in the chest and in the head, leaving Terry's body sprawled across the bed while he was in his pajamas. The Helwigs' daughters, Jill and Cheryl, had been hiding in their rooms petrified after they heard screaming and banging noises. Despite her terror, though, 9-year-old Jill came out. What happened next would strike fear in anyone's heart. As Jill stood in the hallway in shock, the gunman looked directly at her, pointed the gun, and started to pull the trigger. But just like that, he released the trigger without firing the shot. Jill was still frozen as the intruder turned and went down the stairs and then out of the house into the darkness. Police soon arrived within a minute of Dennis's call, followed closely by EMTs who transported Dennis and Cheryl to St. Mary's Hospital in Livonia. That's where they underwent surgery to attempt to save their lives. Their conditions were initially listed as critical, but they did survive following surgery and a week-long stint in the hospital. Sadly, though, 16-year-old Terry did not survive. The community was in complete shock after news of this cul-de-sac attack. But even more shocking was that Dennis told authorities point blank he not only got a good look at the intruder, he knew the intruder personally. But he wasn't the only one who noticed who the intruder was. Carol, she didn't get a good look at the intruder, but 9-year-old Jill, she knew the man as well. Because you see, the man who entered that home that night had lived there before. The assailant was none other than the Helwigs' oldest son, 21-year-old Dennis Helwig Jr. When authorities asked the parents why their son would do this, none of them had a clue. In fact, the only thing they could offer was that Dennis Jr. was currently serving in the United States Air Force as an Airman First Class. Last they knew, their son was stationed at Thule Air Base in Greenland. But how did he end up back in Michigan? Immediately after the attack, a statewide bolo went out to police agencies to watch for Dennis Lee Helwig Jr., who the Air Force reported as being on just regular leave. But what the family hadn't realized was that he wasn't stationed in Thule anymore. Dennis Jr. had moved from Thule to Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico about 6 months prior to the attack.
This episode is brought to you by Fox One. Watch all 104 matches of the FIFA World Cup live in 4K for just $19.99 a month with 3 days free. Build your own multi-view, choose up to 3 streams, and follow player spotlights. Stay on top of every moment with live stats, highlights, and instant replays. The FIFA World Cup, streaming live on Fox One. Offers are subject to change. See fox.com for complete terms and conditions.
Need a laptop that's built to perform and designed to last all day? Select Windows 11 PCs starting at $499.99 are now at Best Buy. Learn more at bestbuy.com. Best Buy. Imagine that.
Immediately after the 4 a.m. attack, investigators started piecing together Dennis Jr.'s movements between Friday, May 6th, when, according to his unit, he went on leave, and Wednesday, May 11th, during the pre-dawn hours when he carried out the attacks on his family. Livonia District Judge Robert Brzezinski issued a warrant that included 6 counts on Thursday, May 12th for Dennis Jr.'s arrest. The counts included first-degree murder, 2 counts of assault with intent to commit murder, and 3 counts of using a firearm in the commission of a felony. In addition to the warrant from the district court, a federal judge also issued a federal warrant as well, because the investigators believed that Dennis Jr. had fled the state following the attacks. After a brief investigation, investigators believe that Dennis Jr. had hopped on a plane for Los Angeles exactly 6 hours after he had carried out the attacks on his family. Warnings were sent with the bolo that he was armed and dangerous once the determination was made that the gun that he used was a .357 Magnum pistol. While the search for Dennis continued, detectives in Livonia were trying to determine the motive behind the brutal attacks. Sources close to the family disclosed that he had been home on leave while he was still stationed in Greenland, and that there had been an argument between Jr., Dennis Sr., Carol, and Terry. The theory was that revenge motivated Dennis Jr., who wanted to get back at his family for a perceived wrong. Mind you, he had last been at home a year prior. But as far as theory and motive, authorities had nothing else. And as far as how Dennis Jr. got into town before the attacks, detectives learned that Dennis Jr. arrived in Detroit around 1 a.m. on Sunday morning, May 9th, and tried to rent a car but was unable to. After the attacks, detectives tracked that Dennis Jr. flew out of Detroit headed towards Los Angeles. While they hunted for Dennis Jr., Dennis Sr. and Carol had both undergone life-saving surgery to repair the damage to their bodies from the gunshots and the stab wounds. Their daughters, Jill and Cheryl, stayed with other family members in an undisclosed location, and that was for their protection. After surgery, Dennis Sr.'s condition remained critical, but following Carol's surgery, she was upgraded to guarded. And you have to remember, Dennis Sr.'s throat was slit. Now, I do want to give you a little backstory on the family. Dennis Sr. was employed at Selfridge Air Force Base as a civilian loan officer. Carol worked at Hudson's Cafeteria at the Westland Mall. Neighbors referred to the family as quiet and friendly, and they were perplexed as to why their eldest son would kill his brother and try to kill his parents. Dennis Jr. attended and graduated from Livonia Churchill High School, where he challenged himself by taking college prep classes like chemistry and advanced math, and he had an above-average GPA. He also played in the band. But according to his guidance counselor, Dennis was most excited about being in the school's ROTC program. That's the Reserve Officer Training Program, the Junior Cadet Program. While Dennis Jr. took various leadership roles within the program, he was described as an introvert by his former JROTC commander, Lieutenant Colonel retired Richard Lance. Colonel Lance told the Detroit Free Press that Helwig was considered, quote, somewhat strange or weird, end quote, by his classmates. He went on to say, quote, that's their characterization, not mine. And I think it was because Dennis was very quiet, very introverted. He kept to himself, end quote. Colonel Lance added that Helwig was well-mannered, neat, clean, and responsive, and very active. In addition to that, he was a member of the color guard, the drill team, and according to Colonel Lance, Dennis was always there when they needed someone for a project. Lieutenant Colonel Lance added that Dennis Jr. seemed to identify with ROTC and had planned on attending college and working towards a commission in the Air Force. Everyone, including his family, was surprised, though, when Dennis dropped out of the University of Michigan Dearborn after one semester and immediately enlisted in the Air Force in August of 1981. After basic training at Lackland Air Force Base and Security Police Tech School, Helwig was assigned to the 12th Missile Warning Group at Thule. After a year at Thule, he was reassigned to the 1608th Security Police Squadron at Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico, where he was assigned to perimeter guard duty. Like I said earlier, Dennis's parents had no idea that he had PCS Thule and was back stateside. Because as it turns out, the last time that Dennis Jr. was home was a year prior to the attacks in May of 1982. During that visit, Dennis Jr. and Terry had gotten into a few arguments. Some had turned physical, but listen, I will swing back to that in a little bit. Following the attacks on his family, several days went by with no sign of Dennis Helwig Jr. He was due to return from leave by midnight on May 25th. Now, I remember looking into this case and thinking, okay, there is no way this guy would show up, right? So once he didn't show up after leave, he would be listed as AWOL. Well, guess what? At around 8:45 p.m. on his very last day of official leave, Dennis, no kidding, rolled up to the gate at Kirtland Air Force Base in a taxi cab. But don't worry, because he was allowed onto the base and allowed to go back to his dormitory, but he was instantly recognized by a fellow security policeman who called it in. The gate guard notified dispatch, who sent more security police to the barracks to take Helwig into custody. Now, when they arrived, the security police officers surrounded the building, and one of them started giving verbal commands to talk Helwig out. The SPs were fully expecting an armed confrontation based on the violence that this man had allegedly displayed at his parents' home in Michigan. But then something happened that they couldn't have predicted. Dennis Helwig Jr. just opened his door, walked out of his room into the hallway completely unarmed. He actually seemed perplexed as to why there was an armed contingent of police there to arrest him. After being taken into custody without incident, they asked if Helwig would allow them to search his belongings. He agreed, and they went through his duffel bag. Inside, they found some incriminating information. They found Helwig's journal, a .357 pistol, 2 knives, and bloody clothes. Wow, is this guy for real? Anyway, Helwig was taken to the Bernalillo County Jail in Albuquerque, where he was held without bond. Once he was in custody, the federal warrant was dismissed, and he was scheduled to appear before a district judge the following Tuesday. The family back in Michigan was notified that Dennis Jr. had been arrested. They and the Livonia Police Department were relieved to hear that the search was over and that he was no longer a threat to his family. Dennis Helwig Jr. was then extradited back to Michigan under the escort of Livonia police officers. After his return, he was arraigned in the 16th District Court in Livonia before Judge Brzezinski on charges of first-degree murder, attempted murder, and firearm charges, and those charges came on June 4th, 1983. As Helwig stood in silence, Judge Brzezinski appointed a public defender for him, then denied any bond and remanded him to the Wayne County Jail pending a preliminary exam scheduled for June 14th. The arraignment didn't take place, though, until July 5th, during which time Judge Brzezinski ordered Helwig to stand trial in circuit court on refined charges: 1 count of first-degree murder, 2 counts of assault with intent to murder, and using a firearm in the commission of a felony. If convicted of these charges, Helwig faced life in prison without the possibility of parole. Following the arraignment, Dennis Sr. and Carol spoke with 2 of Dennis Jr.'s attorneys, and their names were Neil Fink and David Steingold, and they spoke to the attorneys outside of the courtroom. And the defense team told the parents that Dennis Jr. had told them that he had no memory of shooting and stabbing them and killing his brother Terry. According to the defense attorneys, Dennis Jr.'s last memory before the attack was of walking from the motel he was staying at to his sister Jill's school. He claimed that he could not remember the next 18 hours until he was checking out from the motel on Wednesday morning before he flew out. Which is kind of crazy. Why would he have gone to his sister's school? Like, this could have been so much worse if he would have attempted to attack his sister at school, although he didn't attack his sister, so maybe he was not there for them. During this brief meeting with the defense attorneys, Dennis's parents learned that Jr. had flown into Detroit on Friday, May 9th, and did not let his family know he was in town. The last time he had been in Livonia was the year prior when he was on leave from his assignment in Greenland. It was during that visit when the brothers got into several fights. The worst one, though, was when Terry and Dennis Jr.'s fight actually turned physical. Now, if you're thinking, what could cause these brothers, one is, I guess, 16 or maybe 15 and 20, what could cause these brothers to have a no-kidding physical assault, right? Same. I was thinking the same thing, like, well, what happened? Was it over a girl? Was it over some sort of sibling rivalry? Did Terry happen to get a car from his parents and Jr. was upset? Nope. The fight was actually all over a pair of sweatpants. A pair of sweatpants! Apparently, Dennis Jr. had taken and hidden a pair of Terry's sweatpants. And Terry needed those sweatpants for baseball practice. And when he couldn't find them, the brothers came to blows over it. Now, if you are shocked, same. Anyway, when defense attorney Neil Fink told the Helwigs that Dennis Jr. wanted them to know he still loved them dearly, Carol, as a mom, she cried. Dennis Sr., however, he turned away from Mr. Fink saying, quote, "That's just so many words," end quote.
I wrote a little song to remind you Choice Hotels get you more of the experiences you value. The Cambria Hotel's got it all. A rooftop bar, have a ball. Cocktails up here feel just right. Is Cambria amazing? All right. Bring a date, your team, or even your mom. Book direct at choicehotels.com. See you on the roof.
Want to elevate your travel experience? Here's how. With a Delta SkyMiles Reserve American Express card, you can relax before your flight in the Delta Sky Club with up to 15 visits per medallion year. And now through July 15th, 2026, you can earn up to 125,000 bonus miles, so you're closer to your next adventure. The Delta SkyMiles Reserve card. Check out the new design at www.delta.com/Spotify. Minimum spending requirements and terms apply.
So let me tell you a little bit about what happened during the hearing. At that hearing, Dennis Sr. told Judge Brzezinski that his 2 surviving children were his daughters, making it completely clear what his feelings about Dennis Jr. were. During the hearing, Dennis Sr. and Carol described their ordeal during the attacks. Dennis Sr. testified that, quote, "I was attacked by my son with a knife and later on with a gun. I saw him briefly for a second, and then he slashed my throat, end quote. Continuing, Dennis Sr. said that after his son slashed and stabbed him repeatedly, Dennis Jr. left the room and he, Dennis Sr., could hear gunfire in the hallway. He stated, quote, I didn't know if he was trying to kill the whole family or just certain members of the family. I was on the telephone trying to call the police and he tried to come back into the room. I tried to block the door. He reached around the door and shot at me behind the door. He fired twice, end quote. Carol Helwig, the mom, she testified as well. And she testified that she was woken up by, quote, someone over me and he was hurting me. I thought I was being punched, end quote. As Carol relayed her memory of that night to the court, at the defense table, Dennis Jr. cried. Carol described how she chased her attacker, who at the time she didn't recognize, into the hallway. That's when Dennis Jr. turned and shot Carol in the chest. After this hearing, the defense team indicated that they were planning on asking for a psychiatric examination as a prelude to a possible insanity defense. Neil Fink told the Detroit Free Press that Dennis Helwig Jr. was under a suicide watch at the county jail. Dennis Helwig Jr.'s bench trial got underway in late January 1986, 2.5 years after he killed his brother and nearly killed his parents. Wayne County Circuit Judge Charles Farmer presided. So that means a bench trial is a judge-only trial. And presumably, the defense chose a bench trial in order to avoid having to present all this evidence to a jury who could be easily swayed. Now, in opening statements, defense attorney Michael Wiseman said that Dennis Jr. was insane at the time of the attack and was still not well. So, during testimony, Carol took the stand and told the court about a 1985 visit with Dennis Jr. in jail. During that post-attack visit, she asked her son why he did it. She then testified that he accused her of being abusive, stating, quote, my son said I abused him all his life and that I treated him like an animal, end quote. She continued saying, I asked him if I deserved to be shot and stabbed. He said I deserved to die. That must have been really hard for her to hear and then to actually take the stand and testify to that. As Carol testified to this horrifying event in her life, she winced when she was questioned by the Wayne County prosecutor, Timothy Kinney. But bravely, she told Judge Farmer how she was stabbed 10 times and then shot in the chest. Carol said that after she was shot, she could hear Dennis Sr. dialing 911. She stated, quote, I heard him say, we've been shot, and I heard him say, I think it was my oldest son, end quote. Carol testified about the jailhouse visit in 1985 and how Dennis Jr. told her that he thought she treated him like an animal. She also testified that she did feel that her husband favored their younger son, Terry, over Dennis Jr. During his own testimony, Dennis Sr. would corroborate that statement. He would add that he had an average relationship with his oldest son. When Dennis Sr. took the stand to testify, he said that he woke up to his son, Dennis Jr., kneeling over him. He stated, quote, my throat had just been cut. He was right on top of me, kneeling right over me, only inches from my face, end quote. He continued saying that at first, he thought it was all a bad dream, a nightmare. He didn't even really think it was happening. After briefly passing out, he came to and called 911. While he was talking to the dispatcher, that's when he heard 2 shots in the hallway. And then Dennis Jr. tried to force his way back inside the primary bedroom. Jill Helwig, who was 9 years old during the attack, took the stand as well. She was now 12. She testified that her brother pointed a gun at her but never fired it. Jill said that she yelled out to him but that he didn't say anything. She told the court, quote, he turned and looked at me. I remember him pointing the gun at me. He started to pull the trigger, but then he let go, end quote. It's not clear from news articles if Cheryl, who was now about 15 years old, testified or not. She was the victim who was unharmed during the attack, and articles from the time of the attack stated that she stayed hidden in her room while it was all happening. During closing arguments, the prosecution recommended that Judge Farmer find Dennis Helwig Jr. guilty but mentally ill. In Michigan, the law states that a person can be cleared of criminal responsibility if that person was mentally ill and because of that illness, quote, lacked substantial capacity or ability, end quote, to realize that the act was wrong. Judge Farmer found Dennis Helwig Jr. guilty of first-degree murder for the killing of his brother Terry Helwig. He also found Dennis Jr. guilty of 2 counts of intent to commit murder for stabbing and shooting his parents. The convictions carried mandatory sentences of life without parole. His sentencing hearing was scheduled to take place a month after the criminal trial ended. But before sentencing can take place, something shocking happened.
Adobe Firefly is the all-in-one creative studio with AI-powered image and video editing for today's creative process. Built for creators of every kind, Firefly helps you generate, edit, and experiment fast. Because the asks aren't getting smaller, the budgets aren't getting bigger, and the timelines, oh yeah, still tight. With all the best creative AI models in one place, Firefly brings your ideas to life. Unlock a better way to make with Adobe Firefly.
On February 26, 1986, Judge Farmer surprised everyone by revising his verdict before he announced the sentence. He modified the guilty verdict to guilty but mentally ill. Judge Farmer said that he modified the verdict to allow Dennis Helwig Jr. to get the psychiatric help he needed. In an interview with the Detroit Free Press after the sentencing hearing, Judge Farmer stated, quote, "If the original finding had been left alone, he would go to prison," end quote. He went on to say that he had never modified a verdict in a criminal trial before, but felt that it was the right move in this case. In Michigan, this means that the court concluded that Dennis Jr. was legally responsible for his actions, but that he also suffered from a mental illness requiring treatment while incarcerated. After the change of verdict was announced and the sentence was announced, the defense made a motion for a new trial that was denied. Attorney Michael Wiseman stated that, quote, "My feeling is that a new trial was an appropriate remedy because the judge's verdict was against the weight of the evidence," end quote, adding, quote, "The procedural aspect of whether or not he can amend his verdict is a question for the appeals court," end quote. Judge Farmer ultimately imposed 2 life sentences for the 2 counts of intent to commit murder. Helwig also received 2 years for the felony firearms conviction. Dennis Helwig Jr.'s defense immediately filed an appeal, but the Michigan Court of Appeals affirmed the convictions. He appealed again in 1988, but it was declined because the court felt that he had failed to exhaust the state remedies that were available to him. In 1989, he filed a writ of habeas corpus citing ineffective assistance of counsel, and that was also denied. In 1992, he filed an appeal for the dismissal of the writ of habeas corpus. It was also dismissed for the same reasons. He did not exhaust the state remedies available to him. So, where is he now? Dennis Helwig Jr. is now in his 60s. He is serving his sentence at the Lakeland Correctional Facility in Coldwater, Michigan. And because I know that you guys are all going to ask, there has never been a clear, established motive for why Dennis Helwig Jr. attacked his family. Even after trial, investigators and the courts never identified a coherent reason or motive. Before I end today, I do want to tell you a little bit about the murder victim, Terry. Terry E. Helwig was born on February 22, 1967 in Livonia. At the time of his death, he was 16 and a sophomore at Churchill High School. I found the picture of him in uniform with the junior varsity football team smiling with his teammates. In addition to football, he also played baseball. Sadly, I was unable to find an obituary that provided any further information on Terry. All we know is that he was a son and a brother who was loved dearly by his parents and his sisters. Thank you, True Crime Army, for tuning in today. Wasn't that such a sad case? I'm sure that all of the survivors are left wondering why this happened. And the fact that, whether it's true or not, that Junior says he doesn't remember it happening, but it's still weird that he went to Michigan, didn't tell his family, and then remembers walking to his sister's school. I think that's all really strange. Now, I do want to give a shout out to Myrtle for not only finding this case, but for researching it and writing it as well. Thank you so much, girl. Now, my sources for this episode include articles from the Detroit Free Press, the Lansing State Journal, the Albuquerque Tribune, 2 appellate court opinions, Ancestry.com, and the Michigan Department of Corrections offender profile website. Military Murder is a Mama Margot production. The music was created by Tyops. Until next time, remember, you never really know what someone is capable of, so remain vigilant always. You have a fabulous week, and I'll keep digging to bring you another military murder story next time.
want to.
This episode is brought to you by Google Health. Stop chasing someone else's definition of health. What matters is what's healthy for you. Google Health offers a new kind of coach built with Gemini for effortless tracking, sleep insights, and holistic coaching tailored to you. Visit googlestore.com to learn more and start a new relationship with your health. Requires Google account, Google Health app, internet, and Google Health Premium subscription. Features subject to change. Availability and results vary. Not intended for medical purposes. Works independently of Gemini apps. Check responses for accuracy.
Are you one of those media strategy people clicking through slides, scrolling spreadsheets? Yes? Good. This is for you. Because on Spotify, there's an audience that's different, locked in, loyal, invested. They're called fans. Fans don't just listen to music, they feel seen by it, like it belongs to them. So when your brand shows up on Spotify, that's who you're talking to. And you're right next to artists like me, Lizzo. So, are you ready to talk to fans? Spotify advertising. You're among fans.